Before sound, before sky, before the first pulse of light, there was thought. And from thought came music. In the endless quiet beyond time, Eru Ilúvatar breathed a single command into the void: sing. What followed was not a choir, it was creation itself learning its own voice. Countless beings awoke within that boundless hall, each a spark of the One's idea, each given the power to shape the world through melody. They were the Ainur, holy spirits whose harmonies were the threads from which reality would be woven. Among them rose one whose flame burned higher, deeper, more daring than all the rest. Melkor. He did not merely echo Ilúvatar's song, he sought to expand it. His voice was thunder where others were stream, iron where others were silk. When his chords entered the harmony, the entire music trembled. Some turned their heads to listen, others faltered, unsure if what they heard was brilliance or blasphemy. Ilúvatar smiled, for even this defiance was part of the design. But Melkor mistook that smile for indulgence. And so he pressed harder. The first discord in eternity began as a whisper, a small, strange rhythm beneath the beauty of the whole. It was not wicked yet, merely different. But difference has gravity. One by one, a few among the Ainur were drawn to Melkor's new sound, curious, bold, eager to test the limits of their creation. Together they built a counter-theme, proud, magnificent, terrible, that clashed against the music's perfect balance. Where the others sang of light and growth, Melkor's notes brought fire and frost, storms that tore the heavens apart. And though Ilúvatar's voice rose above the chaos, weaving the discord back into beauty, the seed of rebellion had been planted. When the vision was revealed, the world that would be, Arda, the Ainur stood breathless. Mountains rose and fell with the rhythm of the song, oceans rolled with the beat, forests breathed in tune with their creator's heart. Melkor looked upon that vision and felt something new, hunger. For in the heart of Arda burned a light he did not make, the secret fire, the flame imperishable, the essence of creation itself. He reached for it, and it withdrew. He pursued, and it vanished deeper, beyond his reach. The moment his desire turned to envy, the music itself quivered. Melkor believed he had been denied what was his by right, the mastery of flame, the power to create as Ilúvatar created. And from envy was born wrath. When the music ended, the Ainur beheld their song made real, Arda, suspended in the void, unfinished, awaiting the touch of their hands. Many of the Ainur chose to enter it, to dwell within its growing fields and rivers, to love it into completion. Melkor entered too, but not as a guardian. He came as a conqueror. As the first winds stirred the newborn seas, he walked the shores of the world like a king returned to claim his throne. The land bent beneath his will, the air thickened with his heat. He brought light and dark together until neither knew its name. And though he saw the other Vala building, raising mountains, shaping rivers, planting forests, he could not bear the thought that their beauty came from Ilúvatar's harmony, not his own. So he built in secret. He forged mountains taller, seas deeper, shadows darker. Every act of creation became a contest. The world grew heavy with their struggle, music turned into matter, harmony into fracture. The first cracks in Arda were not of stone, but of intention. Yet, even as his pride deepened, there was a strange loneliness in Melkor. For in all his power, he could not create life that truly loved him back. He could shape, command, even destroy, but love, that divine reciprocity, remained beyond his reach. And perhaps that was his truest wound. Ilúvatar's children, those who would come after, the elves and men, were still only dreams, waiting their hour. But Melkor could already feel their shadows in his heart, and he feared them. For they would bear the flame he could never steal, the power to choose freely. It was that truth, more than any war or weapon, that doomed him. And so began the long discord of the world, not in battle, not in blood, but in song, a single, perfect note turned inward upon itself, echoing through eternity, seeking a name for its hunger. It found one. Melkor, the dark composer, the first shadow. And from that moment, the world would never sing the same way again. The world was still young enough to remember silence. Mountains slept beneath newborn skies, and seas shimmered with a purity untouched by time. The Vala, the great powers among the Ainur, worked tirelessly to shape Arda into harmony. Manwë wove the winds, Ulmo filled the deeps with his music, Yavanna whispered forests into being, and all struck mountains from the bones of the earth. They worked not as rulers but as artists, sculpting beauty from the divine echo of Ilúvatar's song. And for a while, creation breathed like a living hymn. But far to the north, something stirred beneath that melody, a presence that hummed in discord. Where others built, Melkor brooded. He walked alone among the peaks of the northern wastes, watching the others' lights flicker across the horizons. Every color, every star, every breath of wind mocked him with its purity. He could not bear their laughter, the way they delighted in Ilúvatar's will as if it were freedom. To him, their harmony was chains. He whispered to the cold air, "They build what is given. I will build what is mine." And the world answered. The snow cracked beneath his steps, and the earth, eager yet fearful, opened itself to his command. He carved caverns deeper than light, filled with molten rivers and walls that dripped iron. The place breathed heat like a beast. Here, his thoughts could take form, unbound by the soft order of the Vala. He called it Utumno, the first fortress of his dominion. Every beat of his hammer echoed like thunder in the deep. Where all shaped mountains for glory, Melkor forged them for war. Where Yavanna grew forests for shade, he burned them for power. He took Ilúvatar's gifts and remade them in mockery. Fire became weapon. Shadow became shelter. Beauty became dominion. But even in triumph, something gnawed at him, an emptiness that power could not fill. The flame imperishable, that secret essence of creation, remained beyond his grasp. He could shape form, but he could not ignite true life. His works were reflections, grand, hollow imitations of what the Vala made effortlessly. It maddened him. So he began to test boundaries, not by destroying, but by corrupting. He approached lesser spirits, Maya of flame and air, and whispered to them as he had once whispered to the void. Why must you serve those who limit you? Why bend your song to theirs when you could lead your own? And some listened. In the glow of Utumno's forges, he gathered the first of his followers, spirits who once sang beside all in Manwë, now drawn by Melkor's promise of freedom. He called them his kindred, and to each he gave purpose, to forge, to guard, to war. From their gathering rose shapes of shadow and fire, great demons who burned with their master's rage. They would later be feared as Balrogs, but for now they were simply children of rebellion, drunk on newfound identity. Melkor looked upon them with pride and said, "See how even Ilúvatar's music can serve my theme. From his song, I have written my own." But pride has a sound, a ringing that never fades. And somewhere beyond his realm, others heard it. Manwë, High King of the Vala, felt the tremor ripple through the airs of the world. "What storm is this?" he asked. Ulmo, in the deeps, answered, "A storm of will, not wind." Melkor's voice grows loud again. Yavanna's forests trembled, Allah's forges dimmed. They knew his craft was not simply ambition, it was the beginning of opposition. At first they sought to reason. They went north and found only emptiness, valleys split by heat, rivers of smoke twisting into the heavens. The land itself cried beneath unseen weight. And when they called his name, the world answered with silence. Then came laughter, deep, echoing, and cold. "Brothers," Melkor's voice thundered from the dark, "you build to please the master. I build to surpass him." The skies cracked. Lightning poured like molten glass, and the first storm of Arda began, not born of weather, but of war. For the first time, beauty resisted beauty. The Vala stood divided between duty and sorrow, for they loved Melkor once as one of their own. Yet now they saw a shadow spreading, not merely across the land, but through the heart of creation itself. Even so, they hoped. They believed his fire might yet cool, his discord still return to the harmony it had left. But Melkor no longer sought harmony. He sought dominion, a world that would sing only his song. And so, beneath the newborn stars, two forces began to shape Arda in their image, one with love, one with envy. The balance hung by a single note, trembling in anticipation of the first true war. The music of the Ainur had ended. Now began the symphony of rebellion. For centuries, Arda healed beneath the patient work of the Vala. The scars of Melkor's storms softened into valleys. The seas found their rhythm. Life began to hum faintly in the corners of creation. The Vala believed perhaps the discord had passed, that Melkor's hunger had been spent in fire and pride. They were wrong. In the shadows of the farthest north, Utumno had grown into something monstrous. Its tunnels reached like claws through the roots of the world, pulsing with forges that never slept. There, Melkor brooded, a god in exile, a king without a kingdom, staring into the molten heart of his own bitterness. He had touched every element of creation but could not awaken life. His fires burned, but they did not breathe. His shadows spread, but they did not feel. What he made was vast, yet lifeless beauty without soul. And in that failure, envy ripened into hatred. The Vala had built a paradise in the far west, Valinor, a realm of radiant peace lit by the two trees, Telperion, silver and serene, and Laurelin, golden and alive. Their mingled light washed over mountains and meadows, turning the world into a song of living color. To Melkor, that light was mockery. It was the music of the one still echoing beyond his reach. He could not bear it. He would see it darkened. But even he, mightiest of the Ainur, could not accomplish that alone. So he sought a companion born not of harmony, but of hunger. In the black canyons of the void, he found her Ungoliant, a spirit once of light, now twisted into a colossal spider of night, feeding upon her own webs of shadow. Where she crawled, brightness withered. She was ancient famine made flesh. Melkor approached her not as a master, but as a supplicant. "Feed," he said, "and I shall give you what all the world denies you, endless sustenance." Ungoliant's eyes gleamed like pits of starlight devoured. "And what," she hissed, "will you have me devour?" He smiled, and even the darkness recoiled. Light itself. Together they crept westward, wrapped in Ungoliant's shroud, a veil so thick that even the stars seemed to vanish. They passed through the defenses of Valinor unnoticed, for who would expect the shadow of their fallen brother to walk again among them? And on the eve of the Vala's greatest celebration, when laughter and song filled the air, the two struck. Ungoliant fell upon the two trees, sinking her fangs into their trunks. She drank their light until it curdled into black venom, and from their dying branches, she spun webs of suffocating darkness. The silver of Telperion dimmed first, then the gold of Laurelin followed, and soon all Valinor lay beneath an eclipse not of nature, but of betrayal. Melkor moved through that gloom like a ghost. He did not look at what he destroyed. His eyes were fixed on the vaults of Forminos, where lay the three Silmarils, jewels forged by Fëanor, brightest of the Noldor. Within them was captured the light of the trees, preserved forever in perfect, living flame. When Melkor laid hands upon them, the world seemed to scream. For in that moment, he did not merely steal light, he wounded creation itself. The Silmarils burned his hands, but he clutched them tighter, defying their purity. Pain and triumph became indistinguishable. He fled into the north with his prizes, Ungoliant trailing behind, her hunger growing beyond his control. She had tasted divinity and would not stop. When Melkor at last turned to claim his spoils, Ungoliant demanded her share, all of it. "You promised to feed me," she hissed, her voice thick with greed. "I promised to lead you to plenty," he answered. "Not to give you my crown." But she was no longer listening. The spider fell upon him, wrapping him in webs of suffocating dark. For the first time since time began, Melkor knew fear. His cries shook mountains and split the sky, and from the depths of Utumno, his servants heard him. The Balrogs, his fiery lieutenants, surged upward, their whips of flame tearing through the dark, driving Ungoliant back into the void. When the battle was done, Melkor crawled free, his once radiant form now scarred. His hands burned black where the Silmarils had seared him. The jewels he set into an iron crown, pressing it upon his brow until the pain became his throne. Thus was Melkor remade, no longer the proud craftsman of discord, but its master. No longer the fallen sun, but the black foe of the world. His name was now Morgoth. In Valinor, the Vala wept. The trees were dead, their light extinguished. Fëanor cursed the thief and swore the oath that would doom his kin. The age of innocence had ended. In the north, Morgoth raised his burning crown and gazed upon his dominion. Light was gone. Darkness reigned. And, for the first time, the world knew despair that had a face. The light was gone. In Valinor, silence ruled where once the two trees had sung. Their trunks stood hollow and gray, dripping resin that gleamed like tears. The Vala stood helpless beneath the shroud of darkness, their immortal hands trembling as if the death of light were the death of hope itself. And among the Noldor, the proud people of craft and flame, grief was turning to fire. Fëanor, the greatest of their smiths, knelt before the empty pedestal where the Silmarils had once glowed. His creation, his life's purest work, had been stolen. Each gem had contained the mingled light of the trees, trapped and tamed by his genius. Now that light and the glory of his people was bound to the crown of the one who had betrayed the world. Morgoth. The name burned on every tongue like poison. Fëanor's eyes, once brilliant with curiosity, now burned with hatred. "He has taken not only my jewels," he whispered, voice breaking, "but our very soul." His sons surrounded him, 7 in all, faces hard as carved obsidian. "Then let us take it back," said Maedhros, the eldest, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "Swear it, father." Before the Vala, before Ilúvatar himself. And there, in the dark of Valinor, Fëanor raised his blade. The steel caught no light, yet it gleamed with something fiercer conviction. "They shall not keep them," he declared. "Neither Vala, nor elf, nor demon, nor any creature born or unborn shall possess the Silmarils, but Fëanor and his sons." His voice thundered through the night, and the Noldor trembled. "If any hold them, we will pursue to the world's end. We will spill the blood of kin and stranger alike until our jewels are reclaimed." That oath was a flame, bright, terrible, binding. The air itself seemed to recoil from it. The Vala turned away, grief-stricken, for they knew such words once spoken could not be undone. Thus began the exile of the Noldor. They gathered in secret, forging arms and banners, their sorrow hardened into vengeance. Morgoth had fled eastward, back into the lands of Middle-earth, to his fortress of Amband, raising black smoke that stained the dawn. Fëanor vowed to follow, though the Vala forbade it. Manwë's messengers came to him in mercy. "Do not chase darkness into the dark," they pleaded. "You will not find your jewels there, only ruin." Fëanor spat upon their counsel. "Ruin already found us. Shall I sit idle while my enemy crowns himself with my light?" When the Vala sought to halt the exodus, the Noldor's fury broke into violence. On the shores of Alquilond, the swan ships of the Teleri gleamed white under starlight, ships the Noldor demanded to cross the sea. The Teleri refused. They would not lend vessels to an act of vengeance. And then, the unthinkable. Swords flashed. Blood fell. The first kinslaying in all the history of the world stained the waters red. Fëanor stood over the fallen, breathing hard, his hands slick with blood that would never wash clean. His people stared in silence, their victory bitter, their triumph hollow. Even his sons looked upon the corpses and faltered. "Father," whispered Amrod, "is this what our oath demands?" Fëanor turned, eyes wild. "The oath demands all. We are bound until the end of days." Behind them, the sea began to whisper. Waves rose, dark and heavy, carrying voices that were not of wind. The Vala's wrath was coming. But Fëanor's pride was greater than fear. He seized the ships and set sail under stars that flickered faintly, their light dimmed by grief. Behind him, those who refused to follow, among them his half-brother Fingolfin, were left stranded on the western shore. When the ships reached Middle-earth, Fëanor's heart, still blazing with vengeance, commanded one last cruelty. He burned the ships. Flames roared into the night, crimson and gold, mocking the lost trees of Valinor. The fire consumed everything: wood, sail, and mercy. It was as though Fëanor sought to make the world bear his grief. From the opposite shore, Fingolfin's people saw the blaze and knew they had been betrayed. Their despair turned to resolve. They would cross the northern ice on foot, through the grinding frost of Helcarax, where even light feared to tread. And thus the first great division among elves was born, brother against brother, kin against kin, all for the light that once united them. Far in the north, in his fortress, Morgoth watched the horizon burn. He smiled, the Silmarils glinting on his brow like stolen stars. "They do my work for me," he murmured, and the crown on his head pulsed with fire. Yet deep beneath that satisfaction, a faint tremor stirred, a memory of what he had once been. For a heartbeat, he felt not triumph, but loss. The very harmony he had sought to destroy had followed him into victory, and it rang hollow. But then the feeling passed. The first wars of the world were coming. And Morgoth, once Melkor, now Lord of Ruin, would be ready to meet them. The sun had not yet risen in the world when the fires of Embodiment began to roar. From the dark pits of the north, Morgoth unleashed his wrath upon Middle-earth, a storm of flame and iron, long prepared in silence. The mountains split with the cry of his legions, rivers turned to boiling veins of steam. Balrogs marched beneath banners of smoke, and from their ranks came a sound like drums forged from the heartbeats of the dead. Thus began the Dagor Bragollach, the battle of sudden flame, where the proud hosts of the elves, long besieging Morgoth's fortress, were consumed in fire. Fields once bright with banners became blackened glass. Towers collapsed. The air itself was molten. And at the center of that inferno stood Morgoth, vast, crowned in iron, his shadow stretching for miles. The Silmarils burned upon his brow, their light now corrupted, blazing red with his hatred. But even gods grow weary of their own power. Each victory hollowed him further, each act of destruction left his spirit thinner, more bound to the matter of Arda itself. He had poured so much of himself into his dominion that he could no longer escape it. The world was his body, his prison, his wound. Still, he pressed on. The Elves of Beleriand, led by the valiant kings Fingolfin and Fingon, stood defiant against the storm. They were broken, scattered, yet unyielding. Fingolfin watched his armies burn and knew there would be no victory, only remembrance. The cries of his people echoed in his heart like a requiem. And then, something in him snapped. Not in despair, but in a fierce, hopeless courage that no god could comprehend. He mounted his horse Rochler and rode alone to the gates of Embodiment. The sky turned black as he came, his armor gleaming like a shard of starlight against a sea of ash. From the walls, the legions watched one solitary figure before the might of an empire. The gates of Embodiment, wrought from black steel, loomed like the mouth of the world. Fingolfin struck them with his sword, and the sound rang through every cavern and chasm. "Morgoth," he cried, his voice carrying through the ruined lands. "Come forth, coward. You who have broken the world, face me now." For a moment, there was only silence. Then the gates trembled. Morgoth emerged, immense, terrible, dragging his hammer Grond, the hammer of the underworld, behind him. Each step was thunder. The ground split beneath his weight. The air thickened with smoke and power. When he saw the Elf King standing before him, he laughed, a deep, echoing sound that made the mountains shake. "Is this how you seek death, son of ice?" he said. "You are brave or foolish." Fingolfin's eyes were calm, bright as frozen fire. "Both," he said, and raised his sword. "But I am not afraid." The duel that followed became legend, a song that would outlive both warrior and world. Morgoth struck first, and the earth cracked. But Fingolfin was swift, faster than shadow, lighter than despair. 7 times he wounded the Dark Lord, and each wound bled fire. The cries of Morgoth rolled across the north, and all creatures trembled to hear them. But pride has its price. Fingolfin faltered, his strength waning, his shield shattered. Morgoth's hammer fell one final time, and the king was crushed beneath its weight. Yet even in death, Fingolfin had the last word. With his dying breath, he drove his sword into Morgoth's foot, pinning him to the earth. The pain was eternal, the wound would never heal. Morgoth stood gasping, black blood spilling across the stones. For the first time since the music of the Ainur, he felt fear not of defeat, but of judgment. In Fingolfin's still face, he saw all that he had destroyed: beauty, courage, harmony, the very things he had once been meant to protect. He crushed the body of the elf and cast it before the gates. But as he turned, the wind shifted. The eagles of Manwë descended, silent as retribution, and bore Fingolfin's remains away. Morgoth watched them vanish into the clouds, light reclaiming what darkness could not keep. And though he stood victorious, the victory tasted of ash. His legions roared, but the sound was hollow. His crown burned upon his brow, searing deeper into his flesh. He turned to the shadows of Angband and whispered, "Why does triumph feel like loss?" No answer came, only the echo of his own voice, hollow, tired, and fading. Far above, beyond the smoke, a new light stirred on the horizon, faint, golden, defiant. The first sunrise of the world. Morgoth flinched from it, retreating into his fortress. The light followed him no further. It shone instead upon the dead, upon the fallen king whose courage had wounded a god. The age of darkness had begun, but so too had the memory of resistance. The world had grown old under shadow. For centuries, Morgoth ruled from the black halls of Angband, his crown heavy with the fire of the stolen Silmarils. The lands trembled under his will, rivers ran poisoned, forests turned to dust, and the skies forgot the color of dawn. Yet even within that endless night, small flames endured. The House of Hadar, the Elves of Doriath, the scattered Edain, all whispered defiance in the dark. Songs were sung quietly, like prayers smuggled through the bars of a prison. From those songs rose a single name that would pierce eternity, Arendelle. Half-elven, half-mortal, he was born of mingled blood and impossible hope. He had heard the tales of the trees and the wars, of Fëanor's oath and Fingolfin's fall. He had seen what Morgoth's dominion had done to the hearts of men, how even courage had learned to whisper. Yet within him burned something neither elf nor man could extinguish, a longing for light. And so, when the world seemed most silent, Arendelle built a ship. He named it Vingelit, the Foamflower, and upon its sails he bore one of the last surviving Silmarils, wrested through pain, loss, and sacrifice. Its light was pure, untainted by Morgoth's hand. It was the memory of the beginning, the first song of Ilúvatar made visible. With it, he crossed the seas that none had crossed before. Storms broke, stars vanished, and the edges of the world fell away, but still he sailed, a mortal daring to trespass into the land of the deathless. When he reached Valinor, he did not kneel. He stood before the thrones of the Vala, his eyes hollow from the long voyage. "Great ones," he said, "I come not for glory, but for mercy. The world burns, and we are dying. If ever your hearts still hear the music of the One, hear it now through me." For a long time, the Vala said nothing. Then Manwë rose, and the air itself seemed to breathe again. "Long have we watched, but no voice has reached us such as yours. You have bridged what pride has broken." Thus began the War of Wrath, the final movement of the world's first symphony. The skies opened. From the west came hosts of flame and light, the Mayor in radiant armor, Eonwë leading banners brighter than the sun. The seas rose to swallow Morgoth's walls, mountains broke like glass. For the first time since the beginning, the Vala themselves descended into battle. The world trembled. Angband, once unassailable, shook with fear. The armies of Morgoth, orcs, dragons, corrupted spirits surged forth, but the tide of light was relentless. In his throne of iron, Morgoth felt the weight of the ages pressing upon him. He looked upon his crown and realized it had grown heavier than the world itself. The Silmarils no longer sang with his triumph, they screamed with his guilt. Every act of creation he had twisted cried out for release. When the doors of Angband burst open, he did not fight. He fled to the deepest chamber, clutching his crown as if it could still make him king. But the Silmarils blazed against his skin, rejecting him, searing the last remnants of his divinity away. When the Vala found him, he was not a god. He was a ruin, vast, broken, trembling. His once majestic voice had withered to a rasp. "Do you see?" he whispered to Manwë. "This world is my song. You cannot unmake it without unmaking yourselves." Manwë's gaze was sorrow, not anger. "You never understood," he said. "Your song was beautiful because it was part of ours, not apart from it." Morgoth screamed as the chain Ainur was laid upon him once more. They dragged him from his throne, through the wreckage of his kingdom, and out beyond the walls of the world, through the door of night, into the timeless void where no echo could follow. And there, the first voice of rebellion fell silent. Yet silence was not the same as peace. The scars of his discord remained, woven into every hill and heart. Evil would rise again in other forms, lesser shadows carrying fragments of his will. Among them, one name would endure, Sauron, his most cunning servant, still whispering the melody of domination in the world's surviving corners. But for now, the sky was clear. Erendil sailed again, not upon the sea, but through the heavens, bearing the Silmaril upon his brow, the morning star, herald of hope. Where his light touched, even the broken lands remembered what it meant to be whole. And far beyond, in the void, Morgoth drifted through nothingness, hearing faint echoes of the song he had tried to master. For the first time since the beginning, he understood it. The discord had never been power, it had been loneliness. He wept, though no tear could fall in the dark. And as his voice faded into eternity, the music of the Ainur played on, vast and unending. Some say, even now, that the Silmaril upon Erendil's brow burns brightest where Morgoth's shadow once was, as if light itself remembers its enemy and sings in quiet defiance forever.